Hi, this is Dr. Bosch, and I wanted to give you a heads up about some of the intricacies of the human skin and especially the growth of skin in the epidermis. Now, this is a typical view of our skin, a diagram, and when you first look at it, you may go, oh my gosh, there's just so much there. But let's just break it down just a little bit. So, for example, the epidermis is our outer layer of skin. That's what you see on your body and the body of people in your life. You're looking at the epidermis. Below that is a much, much thicker dermis. That's where all the blood is. And then below that, a hypodermis. So first, we'd want to kind of look at what's in these different layers. So the epidermis is what we're going to spend most of our time with on this recording. Relatively thin, but there are 5 layers up here in the epidermis. The dermis is fairly straightforward. There's a papillary layer, which is dense connective tissue, dense irregular connective tissue, very strong. And then below that, a reticular layer with reticular connective tissue. And below that, you might notice all this adipose in the subcutaneous layer. So these layers are not that difficult, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but there's good information in the textbook and in the PowerPoint about the dermis and its 2 layers, and then the subcutaneous layer, also called the hypodermis. You'll also learn in the lab and in the reading about hair and hair follicles. You'll hear about the sweat glands, the eccrine sweat glands, and then the oil glands, the sebaceous glands that are next to the hair follicles. I'll leave that up to you. It's not that hard to figure out. But I would like to spend the next few minutes talking about this upper layer. See how thin it is? The epidermis. In fact, if you get cut and you bleed, you actually have to get through the epidermis to hit this supporting connective tissue down here. The connective tissue has blood vessels and nerves and lymphatic vessels, and it supports the epidermis. The epidermis is epithelial tissue and does not have any of its own blood vessels. So this is the epidermis only. So we're really looking at the very edge of the skin. And at the bottom is an area of high mitotic divisions. That is, these skin cells are dividing and dividing. That's called the stratum basal. It's also called stratum germinativum because your skin germinates here just like seeds germinate. And above it is the stratum spinosum, given the name because for whatever reason the edge of some of these membranes are kind of pointed. These 2 areas are areas of high growth in your skin. Cells are dividing, they're forming new cells all the time. Now, the way this works is the cells are developed here in the stratum basal, then they move up and out. And by out, I really mean we lose them. They go in the air, they get washed into the sink at the top here in the stratum corneum. So you have to think about epidermal skin growth as forming cells deep, right next to the dermis. Below this is the dermis. The cells are formed here. There's high mitotic activity, lots of reproduction of cells. But as they move up, they gain keratin. Keratin's a really good protein, a tough protein, kind of waterproof. But as the cells fill with this keratin protein, they also begin to die. So the cells at the very top here are helpful, they protect us, but they are dead. And in fact, they don't even have nerves or anything else. So when you wash your hands and you lose the outer skin cells, you don't scream, ow, 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 because you're really just removing these dead cells of the stratum corneum. So cells grow and divide deep, move up, gain keratin, and then are lost at the stratum corneum. So if we look at an actual picture or microscope slide of the skin, This is the stratum basal or germinativum, and then this is the stratum spinosum. It's kind of hard to see the next two layers, but you can very easily see the stratum corneum. This is where we lose our skin up here. So the cells are produced in this layer, move up slowly, and are continually lost. So we lose our skin cells all the time. In fact, if you've ever had a cast on where you can't scratch your skin or wash it, and then finally you get that cast off, there's just a pile of skin there. You almost like scrape off this gunky stuff, which are all the dead skin cells that normally would go into the air and then your friends and family breathe them. You breathe other people's skin cells all the time, or they go down the sink when you wash. Okay. So, a couple other things and we'll leave this topic. You notice how dark this layer is? This is because these are melanocytes, and melanocytes produce melanin, which is the pigment in skin. So unless your skin looks like a white piece of paper, you have melanin pigment in it. We all have the same number of melanocytes. We're all very closely related. But depending on your genes, you may produce more melanin or less melanin. So people come in all different colors based on how much melanin is produced. In addition, if you are relatively light-skinned and you go out in the sun, UV light is very damaging to your skin. So these melanocytes will work in overdrive to give you more of a coating of melanin and you'll have a tan. What's a little more difficult to see in that actual picture are the keratinocytes. And if you look at that word there, keratin, that means cell, keratin cell. These are the cells that produce keratin that makes your skin tough. It's very important for waterproofing and for the strength of your skin. It's the same material that your hair is made of and your nails are made of. But as I said, as the keratin builds up in these cells, they eventually die, and then we lose them by the time they're in the stratum corneum. So the keratinocytes are a little bit more superficial than the melanocytes. Melanocytes are in that basal layer, releasing melanin pigment into these cells. I hope this discussion was helpful. Just a reminder that the epidermis was this thin layer up here. So those 5 layers are just on the edge of your skin. And that's where the skin is produced and lost on the surface. All right.